Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Star Wars Talk here on its brand new day on Sundays. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today. Now, as I have announced over the past couple of weeks, we have moved Star Wars Talk off of Tuesdays, so obviously the show's no longer called Star Wars Talk Tuesdays, and we've moved it over to Sundays. Well, where was it last week? Well, last week was the Oscars. So that's why we didn't have Star Wars Talk last week. But this is the first day that we're launching Star Wars Talk on its new day here on Sundays. And thank you guys so much for being here and being a part of this. Here's how today's show is going to go. I've picked out 5 topics that you guys have emailed into me. How do you now send in an email for Star Wars Talk? Well, it's pretty much the same thing. You email me at john@thejohncampeashow.com, but instead of putting SWTT in the subject line, now just put Star Wars in the subject line. So email me at john@thejohncampeashow.com, put the word Star Wars in the subject line, and as always, guys, keep those emails to 90 words or less. Now, I've got 5 topics picked out, and then we're going to go to the live chat and see what you guys are saying in the live chat. So for now, let's get things rolling with this. And the first question today comes to us from Ronald Jamal Everett, who writes, "True talk, when I heard Favreau was going to be doing a Star Wars show, I just about shit myself. No lie, this man is going to deliver. Iron Man is still one of my favorite superhero movies, and what he did with Jungle Book is crazy. Why would anybody not be happy about this? Never really cared if they did a Star Wars TV show, but now I can't wait." All right, thanks a lot for the email, Ronald. And yeah, so one of the big pieces of news that came out this week, and certainly the biggest piece of news in the world of Star Wars, was that Jon Favreau has signed on to write and produce the first Star Wars live-action TV series for the upcoming Disney streaming channel. And we talked about it on the John Campea Show earlier this week. But this is significant on a number of fronts. So let's even put the Jon Favreau thing aside. A lot of us have speculated for a while that the whole reason, I mean, maybe one of the main reasons that they're even launching or felt they could launch this Disney streaming service was, in fact, to have a live-action Star Wars TV series. So that really came as no surprise to us when we found out that that's what Favreau was going to be doing for them. So that's great. I still don't know. I'm glad your mind has been changed, Ronald. I still don't know how I feel about a Star Wars live-action TV series. It does concern me a little bit, but like you, my enthusiasm goes up a few notches with the addition of Jon Favreau. I mean, look, besides the fact that this guy is a Star Wars fanatic, now that is not the most important thing at all. We've seen fanatics of certain properties direct those properties and have it not work out. Totally. But Jon Favreau is one of the hottest directors on the Disney roster right now. They trust this guy completely. You know, they handed him Lion King. He did a magnificent job with Jungle Book. In many ways, he kicked off the entire MCU with Iron Man. And, you know, his film set the tone for what the MCU was going to be and become. His film Chef is one of the best indie films of the past 10 years, I think. I just love that movie, Chef. If you haven't seen Chef, check it out. It'll make you hungry and it'll make you happy that you watch it. So by all means, check that out. And it's just him being on board to write and produce is incredible. Now, some people, and we talked about this the other day as well, little concerned, say, well, okay, that's great that he's writing and producing, but you know, man, why isn't he directing too? Remember, there is a big difference in the role of the director when it comes to movies or television. In movies, the buck stops here person is the director. So you want to see that your favorite person is directing the film, because that's ultimately the buck stops here person. That's the person most responsible for what kind of product you're going to get at the end. But it's different for a television series. For a television series, the director is not as important. The buck stops here people with television are the writers, in particular the showrunner. Now, they never used the word showrunner when talking about Favreau, but they said he's going to be the producer, executive producer, and the writer. That, to me, tells me he's going to be the showrunner. Maybe they'll say it's something different, but to me, that all says that he's going to be the showrunner. And the showrunner is by far the most important person when it comes to a television series. They're the ones who are in control. They're the ones who have the final say, not the directors of the individual episodes. So there's a difference here. So that's why I'm quite excited that Favreau, and I would be shocked if Favreau didn't direct the first episode himself. because we've seen Jon Favreau direct the first episode of another number of television series to great effect. I'm very excited about this. I think is great. I mean, coming off of Chef, coming off of course, Jungle Book, which was crazy, going into Lion King, which we're all ecstatic about, and Disney must be completely pleased with what they're seeing so far in their Lion King movie that Jon Favreau's been making. They must be thrilled to now turn to him and say, the first Star Wars live-action television series ever, we're going to put it on your shoulders, Favreau. That must tell me they love what they see in the Jungle Book. So I'm very excited about that. Like you, Ronald, I'm beside myself. I'm not quite with you yet on being excited for the series, but I'm certainly far more interested in this series and far more on board with it, knowing that Favreau is going to be the shepherd of it. That gives me some confidence. That gives me some hope. So let's see how that all goes. But it's exciting times. It's an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Carnell, who writes, prior to the prequels release, I felt it was a missed opportunity to already know it was the story of Anakin's fall. I felt Lucas shouldn't assume that we know who Darth Vader is. I know, ridiculous. But new fans could watch the prequels and move on to original trilogy. The reveal in episode 5 wouldn't already be a spoiler. Well, thanks a lot for the comment, Carnell. And, you know, you're not the only person I've heard suggest that before. Not at all. You're not alone in that. There are many people that kind of thought that overall philosophy, particularly of the marketing of the prequels, was a misstep, that they shouldn't have done that. And certainly, yes, the movies do make the assumption that you are familiar with the original trilogy, particularly the marketing, and that you are aware that Anakin Skywalker is indeed Darth Vader. I don't think that was a mistake. I think there are people in this world who have never seen a single Star Wars and they know Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader. So myself, and it's funny because I have a friend of mine up in Canada who kind of suggested something similar to what you're saying. Not exactly what you were saying, but something similar in the terms of the way that it was marketed. You know, they should have set it up where Anakin becomes Vader, should have been a big surprise, but the movies handled it like we knew it was coming. But I disagreed with them. Yes, the movies handled it like we knew it was coming because we did know it was coming. There's no point in a movie trying to pretend like the audience doesn't know something when we all know that the audience knows that something. There's no point in pretending that the audience isn't aware that Anakin becomes Vader when everybody knows Anakin becomes Vader. I'm sure there were a few people on the planet that didn't, yes, but the vast majority of the audience going in to watch this knew. Most of us knew. And it's kind of funny because I just did a review. What did I just do a review of? Oh yeah, I did a review of Red Sparrow, right? Where everybody knows, I'm not going to give away any spoilers here, but everybody knows in the movie Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence, everybody knows which side Jennifer Lawrence is on. Like, you're watching the movie, it's clear which side she's on. But then they set it up near the end and play it out as if we don't know what's going on. I talked about this in my review, if you saw my review of Red Sparrow. And I felt like the filmmakers just made themselves look idiotic. Because I'm watching the scene unfold and it's like, do the filmmakers think we're still guessing whose side Jennifer Lawrence is on? Because I'm getting the feeling the filmmakers are thinking we don't know yet which side Jennifer Lawrence is on, and we pretty much do, and it makes the scene feel really stupid. It makes what they did in that movie feel really dumb, because they're playing it as if we didn't already know, and we already knew. We already knew, it was clear. And I think that's I fear that's how it maybe would have played out in the prequels. It's like, why are they acting as if we, the audience, why are they treating the audience and portraying, like, relaying this information to us, to the audience, as if we have no idea that this little kid becomes Darth Vader? Of course we knew. Of course we knew where he's coming from. So, as much as I don't like the prequels, personally, I feel like they handled that one right. But you feel differently, and that's totally cool. And there's some other people that do as well, but that's just my feelings on it. Thanks a lot for sharing, man. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the third topic today comes to us from Vrinder Singh Johal, who writes, "Hey, John, love the show. Thank you so much, Vrinder. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, but I was wondering why I've never heard much, if any, praise for the director, Richard, Richard Marquand. Can you tell me why? Okay, let me just type up something here. I was going to see where he's at these days. But one of the reasons, we hear about Star Wars, and here's the funny thing. A lot of people out there, and this is totally understandable, a lot of people out there are still under the impression that George Lucas directed all 3 of the original Star Wars movies. A lot of people out there still believe that George Lucas directed all 3 Star Wars movies. That, of course, is not true. Irvin Kershner directed Empire Strikes Back. George Lucas directed the first one. Irvin Kershner directed the second one. And your guy directed the third. We all know that. Like, we understand that that's the thing. So why doesn't he get any praise? It starts with, one of the reasons he doesn't get any praise is because a lot of people just think George Lucas directed it. I mean, that's the number one reason why he does not get any credit or any praise. And I'm with you. Return of the Jedi, to me, is the greatest Star Wars movie ever made. I know a lot of you guys think it's Empire Strikes Back, and that's cool. That's fine. To me, though, Return of the Jedi, and I've explained why on a number of occasions, Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars movie ever made. And to me, they're all 1A and 1B, the original trilogy. I mean, they're practically, there's nothing that separates them. But if I had to order them, I put Return of the Jedi as number 1. And yet, Richard doesn't get any credit. And I still say that the number one reason for that is because of the fact that Lucas, it's assumed, a lot of people, most people on the planet still think George Lucas directed Return of the Jedi, as they think he directed Empire Strikes Back. Now, you could also then say, yeah, but that's true, but Irvin Kershner gets credit for Empire. Yeah, to some small degree, because for another reason. Because a lot of people, I'd say the majority of Star Wars fans out there, think Empire Strikes Back is the greatest of the Star Wars trilogy. And I'm not going to argue against that. I mean, I think it's Return of the Jedi, but Empire's magnificent. I'm not going to argue against anybody who thinks Empire is the greatest Star Wars movie ever made. Why not? So, because a lot of people think Empire is the greatest one ever made, some people will understand that Kershner is the guy who directed that one. Some. But even then, I still think the majority of the movie-going audience out there, if you ask the majority of film fans out there, who directed The Empire Strikes Back, I still think 90% of the people out there are going to say George Lucas. And so, those are the two main reasons why I don't think Richard gets much credit. Number one, because everybody thinks George Lucas directed it. And number two, the majority of Star Wars fans think Empire's the best one. So those people who do know that George didn't direct the second and third one will give more credit to Irwin because Empire is just a little bit more celebrated than Jedi is. So that's kind of the way I see it. All right, let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic today comes to us from Danny Rivera, who writes, even though the Snoke conspiracies were pretty much over after The Last Jedi, I can't help but wonder, what if JJ's original plan was to have Snoke be Darth Plagueis and expand his story into the next episodes? And then Rian Johnson was like, nah, I want to focus on Kylo. I'm cutting him off. No pun intended. Your thoughts? Well, I don't think that J.J. Abrams ever had massive plans for Snoke. I think Snoke, you guys have heard me say this before, Snoke was our Emperor figure in this new trilogy. And what did we ever know about the Emperor during the original trilogy? Nothing. He was in charge. He was bad, and he was powerful. That's all we knew about Palpatine in the original Star Wars trilogy. Was just that he was the Emperor, he was really powerful, and he was really nasty. That's all we ever knew, and that's all we ever needed to know. That's all we ever needed to know. So, JJ might have had a few more details than that in mind. However, I don't think JJ or anybody at Lucasfilm ever felt like at any point in this franchise does the focus need to go onto Snoke and away from other things. I don't think he ever had that. But even if he did, here's the thing. It's not like The Last Jedi gave us an explanation for Snoke and therefore killed all the speculation. They just didn't reveal anything about Snoke. Like, for instance, if, let's say for argument's sake, that JJ still wanted to say that Snoke was Darth Plagueis. Okay, let's say he did. I don't think he did, but let's say he did, for argument's sake. If he did, nothing that happened in The Last Jedi really precludes JJ from picking that story thread back up and carrying it on in 9 if he wanted. Let's say, for instance, that J.J. Abrams, in the back of his head doing Episode 7, that Snoke was a disgraced, rejected Jedi who was expelled from the Jedi Order a long time ago. Okay, then nothing that happened in The Last Jedi stops J.J. Abrams from picking that story back up. I mean, yes, Snoke is dead, but from revealing those facts about him later if he so chose. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when talking about Snoke and what could be his background, what might not be his background, all that kind of stuff. It's not like it's not like Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi revealed Snoke was just a janitor on the Death Star and now he's got the Force. It's not like he revealed that and therefore that kills any story JJ wanted to tell about him later. He just didn't address anything. So anything that JJ wanted to do with Snoke, he's still free to do completely. Just, I mean, without a living character. It'd have to be a flashback and giving us background information on him. But other than that, he can still give us any Snoke background that JJ wants to. You guys know how I feel. I don't need to know anything more about Snoke. We knew all we needed to know about Snoke because he's not the center of the story. But if JJ wants to give us more stuff, JJ is still in a position that he can give us more stuff. All right, let's move on now to the final emailed in the question today, and then we'll go over to some live stuff. And the final emailed question today comes to us from Yo Mama. And Yo Mama writes in, I have always felt that Han's death in The Force Awakens was missing just a little bit. The fact that he dies at the hands of his son never really hits that hard for me while watching the movie. What do you think are some easy ways they could have added a little depth to that relationship to make that moment a little bit harder? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And look, I am in complete agreement with you on this. I love The Force Awakens. I love that movie. It's not as good as any of the original trilogy, but I really love it. I think it's great. It's one of those movies that I just liked more and more each time that I saw it. But I have a couple of problems with The Force Awakens. And one of the problems was exactly what it is you're talking about here. That moment that Han Solo dies, it lacked something. I mean, it lacked a lot. It did not have for me in that moment as an audience member the emotional impact of what a scene where a son kills his own father should have had. I felt none of the emotional impact. And Han dying at that point just kind of almost became surreal because like, wait, well, that seems like a waste for Han Solo to die this way. Now, and I haven't said this in a long time, but back when I first saw the movie, here was what I thought they should have done, okay? If you're going to ask me what they could have done to give that moment where Han Solo, one of the most beloved Star Wars characters of all time, dies at the hands of his own son, what could they have done to give in that moment more emotional impact, more heft, more weight, to make that scene more memorable for the audience and really punch us in the gut emotionally the way I think they wanted it to? And I think the biggest problem with that scene and what could have improved it drastically was simply this. We've never felt any connection between Han and Kylo. Because when they walk out on that, a plank walk that had no handrails for whatever reason. It's funny, if you go back and look at the walkway, there's handrails for the first 5 feet of it on both sides, and then the handrails just go away. There's no handrails. So, I don't know, the safety inspector was sleeping that day. But anyway, when you go back to that scene, when they walk out on that walkway, that is the first time that we ever see the two characters together. That's the first time we ever see the two characters together. It's the first time we ever hear these two characters talking to each other. Yes, there was that one brief moment at Maz's place when he sees Kylo from across the rubble, but that was just from a distance and only for a moment. When Han and Kylo walk out on that walkway on Starkiller Base, it is the first time we see them together, and it is the first time we hear them exchange words. What they should have done to give that scene more emotional impact is to have written a scene into the whole Maz Kanata palace and the First Order shows up and the Resistance are there fighting them. They should have written a scene into that entire sequence where Han and Kylo do come face to face. We should have seen these two characters together earlier in the film, exchange some words, show some conflict with Kylo, have Han pour his heart out to him in the scene, blah, blah, and then the battle pulls them apart. Kylo gets on a ship and takes off. Han goes back and regroups with Finn. That's what they should have done. Because had they done that, then when they come together on Starkiller Base on that unsafe walkway with no handrails, it wouldn't have been the first time we saw them together. We now have some background to them. And I think had they done that, written 1 2-minute scene, 2 minutes, earlier in the film, I think it would have added, like, doubled the emotional weight of that moment when Kylo Ren kills his own father. I think it would have doubled the emotional impact. And I think and there are other mistakes The Force Awakens makes for sure, but to me that is the most glaring mistake, was not giving us a moment, not giving us a first scene of seeing Han and Kylo together, exchanging words, exchanging glances, having Han pour his heart out, showing Kylo having some conflict, then withdraw, and then they're back together again on Starkiller Base, and then it would have had so much more punch. You know? Anyway, that's just how I see it. I know some of you guys disagree with me about that, and that's cool. It's all subjective, but that's really what I think would have made that scene a whole lot better and had a whole lot more punch. The movie's still great, but the death of Han Solo just lacks something. I think that's what it was. All right, guys, with that stuff out of the way now, I'm going to go over to your live questions. I know you guys have already been sending in live questions, so let's head over there right now and see what you guys want us to talk about. All right. First live question comes to us from Stephen Rowley, who writes, is it a safe bet to say the next animated series is looking for Ezra? I don't think so. Of course, Star Wars Rebels has now come to an end. I'm going to miss the show. The show was a little bit hit and miss for me overall, but overall I enjoyed it. I liked it overall. And I thought it was I had some major problems with the finale, but overall I thought it was a very good finale, and I enjoyed it. And of course, at the end, there's this allusion to now some big search for Ezra. I haven't heard anything, so I don't know any of this for fact, but my guess is no. My guess is the next series is not going to be about, the search for Ezra Miller. I don't think that's really, because otherwise it's just Rebels again. It's just Rebels Season 5 at that point. That jumps ahead 20 years. And I don't think that's what they're doing. I think what they're doing is doing something completely different now. Again, no one's told me this. I'm just saying what I'm guessing at this point. It very well could be the search for Ezra Miller. The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the failed Jedi, all searching out for Ezra. That could be it. It could be it. But I really don't think it is. Because, again, at that point, it's just Rebels Season 5. I think they're doing something completely different with a new set of characters in a new time frame, and that's the way they're going to go. Again, I don't know that for sure, but that's the way I think they're going to do it. All right, next up is Riley Lopez, who writes, do you think it is possible that Snoke is not the main villain? That possibly there is somebody higher than him that we have yet to meet? Thanks, John. No, I don't think so. I think in Episode 9, really all the attention is going to go on Kylo and Rey. Because really, ultimately, the new trilogy has been building towards that Kylo v. Rey. And they shouldn't do the Batman v Superman thing and just say V. It's going to be Kylo versus Rey. That's where the attention's going to be. Not to mention, Snoke was portrayed so ridiculously powerful. To have somebody even more powerful than him pulling his strings seems a little ludicrous. Because it feels like if there was somebody even more powerful than Snoke, that person would have no problem just taking over the galaxy and they don't need anybody else. So, for those reasons, I don't think so. But again, crazier things have happened. I won't fall out. If I'm sitting in the theater for Episode 9 and some guy comes out of the shadows that he was really in control of Snoke the whole time, I'm not going to fall out of my seat with shock. I don't think that's what they're going to do. But again, we've seen stranger things happen in Star Wars. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question comes to us from Dakota Barber, who writes, What do you think about what they've done with Kylo so far? I think he's one of the best developed characters in Star Wars and loved his development in The Last Jedi. I am in agreement with you. Now look, I have my issues with The Last Jedi. Everybody knows that, but still overall I really quite like the film. But where I differ with, one of the many areas that I differ with a lot of people is the development of Kylo Ren. I think Kylo Ren is a wonderfully developed character. And, you know, some people will complain, you've heard me talk about this, some people will complain, he's so whiny and bratty. Yes, which makes him the perfect, most susceptible person to the influence of the dark side. No self-control, giving into rage, giving into anger, giving into hate. That's what he does. And he's still relatively young, so he's not like as experienced as Vader, where he can reel it all in and just harness that hatred. He's still somebody who lashes out. But we see him grow and develop and change as a character. From turning on his father to turning on Snoke, eventually at the end. Kill the past, whether that's Han Solo or Snoke. Get rid of it, I'm moving in my own future. There's something about the way they've handled the development of Kylo Ren that I think is actually very, very, very special. And look, I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. If you don't like the Kylo Ren character, I ain't going to try to talk you out of it. All film's subjective. You're entitled to that opinion, and your opinion is no better or no worse than mine. But for me as a fan, I got to tell you, I think the way they've navigated the Kylo character is fascinating, and I'm very curious to see where they pick up with him in Episode 9 and what direction they have him go in Episode 9. I hope they don't revert to just Kylo Ren right back to where he was at the beginning of The Force Awakens. He's had a journey. We find him in a different place at the end of The Last Jedi than he was at the beginning of The Force Awakens. And I hope when JJ picks up Episode 9, he picks up where Episode 8 left off, as opposed to just reverting back to the beginning of what the Kylo Ren character was before. So we'll just see how all that goes. All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. Next one comes to us from Dark Sith, who writes, thoughts on a Band of Brothers style series set in the Star Wars world? Well, I mean, that could really mean anything, though, Dark Sith. I mean, you could say, I mean, sure you could. That's definitely possible. But really, there's 1,000 different types of storylines you could do that all sound great. That one could totally work. A Band of Brothers style series could totally work. But there's 100 other kinds of series with a Star Wars world that could also totally work. It's not about which template they're going after. It's all about how it's individually executed. Because they could do a Band of Brothers style show and the show could suck. It wouldn't necessarily suck because they did it at Band of Brothers style, but a lot of other things could go wrong. You can make the Star Wars show about Felipe, the sentient dancing microphone. He becomes a Jedi. This little guy jumping around, woo, I'm a Jedi, I'm a microphone with a lightsaber, and he's jumping around, whatever. But if it's executed brilliantly, it's going to be the greatest. So I don't really have too much of an opinion other than just to say, sure, give that a shot. And maybe it'll work, and maybe it won't. All right. Next up, also from Dark Sith, writes, if you had to eliminate either the original trilogy or the Oscars, what do you eliminate? Bring on the filthy. As painful as it is to me, I eliminate the original trilogy. Because the Oscars, to me, are the celebration of the entire film industry. Star Wars, to me, is the greatest thing ever in the world of film. But the world of film is still, overall, is still more important than any one particular franchise of films. And the Oscars are kind of the representative, the embodiment, if you will, of the celebration of film overall. And that's what it is to me. It may not be that to you, but it is to me. And that being the case, if I had a save one, kill one situation, it would break my heart, but I would get rid of any individual film franchise before I would get rid of the Oscars. So again, the Oscars are the manifestation, the representation of a celebration of the entire film industry, and the entire film industry is greater than even the greatest part of the film industry, which is Star Wars. So I would go eliminate Star Wars, keep the Oscars. That's what I would do. Let's see. Mason Barr writes, out of all the Star Wars films, which is your favorite? Oh, I already mentioned that a little bit earlier. Return of the Jedi is absolutely my favorite. Ethan Hunt writes, hey, John, if Lucasfilm approached you and said, pitch us something for a novel or game, what would you pitch them? Thanks, and keep on being the best online movie pod. Well, thank you so much for the compliment, Ethan. I don't know. I mean, I would have to think about it. That's not something I can just... I'm not one of these guys who walks around with a moleskin and writing down my Star Wars movie ideas all the time, so I really don't know. What I would ask them to do, though, is do whatever you need to do to bring back the West End Games D6 system of Star Wars, the role-playing game. That, to me, is first and foremost what I would want them to do, what I would need them to do. It's the D6 West End Games version of the role-playing game. That's the book I'm holding in my hand here. It is, to me, the greatest role-playing game system ever. And it's not just because it's got the Star Wars name on it. There are incarnations of the Star Wars role-playing game that I don't necessarily like, even though it's called Star Wars. To me, the West End Games D6 system was just the best, most... It's so intuitive. It's so intuitive of the game. It's so easy to wrap your head around all the dynamics of it, which leaves you more open to just worry about story and game. And I love that system. So if Lucasfilm approached me and said, anything you want to do with the game, I would say, do me a favor. Do what you have to do. Relaunch the D6 system of the Star Wars role-playing game. Please do that. That would be my beg and my cry, if you will. All right, let's go back over to the questions. This one comes to us from Anthony Cullen. And Anthony Cullen writes, John, you've inspired me. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've inspired me. You made a video called Screw You, I Love the Ewoks. Yes, I did. Now I'm going to make a video called Screw You, I Love Magic Space Whales. Hey, by all means, if you like those stupid, ridiculous space whales, then by all means, as a fan, put together your thesis, put together your statement of belief about why you love the space whales, why you think they work, and you share that with the fan community. That's what the fan community is all about. Just because I don't like the ridiculous space whales doesn't mean you shouldn't like them. And if you like them, by all means, man, you make a video, you express your passion for them, you express why you like them and why you think they're not the total waste of space and time that I happen to think they are. But that's great, and that's the wonderful thing about Star Wars, man. There are things we can love about them. Some people don't like the Ewoks. That's cool. I love the Ewoks, and I'm going to express why. If you like those space whales, God bless you. You make a video expressing why you love those space whales. For sure. All right, and by the way, if you haven't seen my video called Screw You, I Love the Ewoks, you should look it up. The Ewoks are the most fearsome, incredibly vicious little creatures Star Wars has ever introduced, and I give a passionate defense about why I think the Ewoks are awesome. So you should go check that out if you get a chance. Let's see. Murray for Us writes, I feel like Star Wars Rebels finale threw original canon out the window. Thoughts? I don't know that we can just make that blank of a statement. It just threw all canon out the window. But I am concerned that it threw elements of canon out the window. That we are returning to a canon schmanon kind of mentality. We've been seeing cracks in the armor at Lucasfilm about this big grand thing. And remember, I've been saying for years, since they announced this big grand thing, from now on, all novels, comic books, games, movies, they're all canon. And I remember when they first announced that, I kind of said something along those, well, that's nice, but you ain't going to be able to keep that up. You just aren't. I applaud the effort and everything, but you just aren't. You just aren't going to be able to keep that up. And sure enough, we've started to see cracks in that armor. A lot of deviations from some of the novels that are coming out that are wildly different from what we're seeing in the movies. There was this one situation, for example, where, you know, in the novelization of Star Wars The Force Awakens, Poe and Rey meet each other. In the novel, and apparently it might have been a deleted scene as well, Poe and Rey meet each other in the novelization of Star Wars The Force Awakens. However, then Star Wars The Last Jedi comes and completely craps on that by having that scene where, hello, I am Poe, hello, I am Rey. This awkward, ridiculous sequence that they did. There was no reason to ignore what they said. I think just most of the audience had already assumed they met and knew each other. However, one conflicts with the other. Now, Pablo Hidalgo, God bless him. You should be following him on Twitter. The dude is super Star Wars nerd. Does a great job over there. Love it. However, I will disagree with him on this one point. I'm a huge fan of his, but I will disagree with him on this one point. You know, he tried to justify it by saying, well, you know, the novels are canon except for where they conflict with movies. That's not how canon works. When you say something is canon, you're saying it's canon. If it's only canon until something else comes along and contradicts it, then it was never canon in the first place. You can't say, oh, that girl, yeah, she's sort of pregnant. No, she's either pregnant or she's not. The status of her pregnancy may change later, but she's either pregnant or she's not. Star Wars, the novels are either canon or they're not. You don't get to say, well, they are canon until this happens and unless that happens. You know what you're right back to? You're back to those multiple letter designations of canon before. Oh, that's A canon, that's B canon, that's G canon, that's the big canon. Now this one is this kind of canon and this one's this kind of canon, and it just created this whole huge confusing mess. You don't get to say it's all canon and then start throwing asterisks beside it. Because now what you've just told us is, hey, if you read something in the novels, it may or may not be real. It all depends on what we decide to do with the movies later. Because you see, if the novels are canon, then when you're making the movies later, you're keeping them in consistency with what was written because it's canon. Canon doesn't change. That's why you call it canon. So, yeah, we've already seen the cracks. There's a whole lot of discrepancies in the Phasma novels compared to what we get in the movies. Whole lot of discrepancies what we're getting in the Thrawn novels compared to what we're getting in Rebels. I mean, it's just starting to pop up. And you know, it's fair. That's fine. Just, let's drop the charade. Let's drop the charade pretending that everything we're now creating is canon. Let's just drop the charade. Just say, look, the novels are the novels. They try to stay as close to the movies as possible, but they're the novels. The movies are canon. Everything else is just supportive material that may or may not be canon. Just call it for what it is, because that's the way it's working out at any rate. So just call it for what it is. Don't say something's canon unless, well, then as soon as you throw the word unless in there, then it's not canon. If it's canon, that means it is Bible. That means it is concrete. That means it is consistent with everything before it, and everything that comes after it has to be consistent with it. As soon as you say unless, then it's not canon. So let's just stop pretending it's canon. Sorry, I can rant on this issue of canon all day. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Alcoholophile, interesting name. Alcoholophile writes, over under 40%. That Solo beats Justice League's worldwide box office of $657.6 million. Oh, I'll take the over on that. Yeah. I think Solo will probably come into the $700 to $800 million range. So I will definitely take the over on 40%. I'd actually probably set the number at like 73, 74%. Is where I would hit that number. I don't think Solo is going to hit $1 billion. It'll be the first Star Wars movie of the new era that does not hit $1 billion. And that's fine. It doesn't need to hit $1 billion. But I do think it will exceed the $657 million. I do. I think it'll come in closer to $800 million on that point. And now whether it's good or not, we'll just have to wait and see. All right, next one comes to us from Cameron W., who writes, might Luke surviving be the worst fake death ever? No, not necessarily. And here's why. Because unlike, say, well, and for those of you who are wondering where Cameron's coming from, if you haven't heard me say this before, I have a theory that I don't really believe. I have a theory that I don't actually believe, but I have a theory that it is possible that Luke didn't actually die at the end of The Last Jedi. I think it is theoretically possible he did not actually die. He disappeared, which suggests he died, for sure, and odds are if I had to put $1,000 on it, I would bet that he's dead. Yes. So let me be clear about that. Don't put words in my mouth later saying, John says Luke's alive. No, I'm not saying that. He is most likely dead. I'm just saying there's a possibility he's still alive. But at any rate, if, whatever reason, JJ decided, yeah, that's the way I'm going to go with this, Luke's not actually dead, and they bring Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker back, that Luke actually projected himself and force teleported himself to somewhere else in the galaxy at that point, because now the First Order knows where he is. Kylo Ren now knows where he is, so therefore he's got to get out of there. The X-Wing isn't going to fly anymore. It's been sitting in the bottom of water for however many years. It's not like on Dagobah where it was just sitting in the water for a couple of days. So he wasn't going to be able to fly anywhere. So I think there's a possibility he's alive. Now, if he is alive, and again, I don't think that's likely. But if he is still alive, would that be like the worst fake-out death ever? And I'm going to say no, because let's say, for example, let's take, say, director Fury. Let's say Nick Fury, Samuel Jackson's Fury character in Captain America Winter Soldier, where they fake kill him, but they tell the audience he's dead. They tell all the characters and they tell the audience extensively that Nick Fury is dead. And then later on, he's not. Nothing ever said that he was dead in The Last Jedi. There wasn't some title, like when Luke disappears, it's not like some title comes on the screen, and thus ended the life of Luke Skywalker. Like, nothing told us he was dead. Rey knew he was gone, but he might have teleported himself and just cut himself off from the Force again. So no one, I mean, there's a million different explanations. So I would say that in the unlikely scenario that Luke is still alive, again, let me stress the unlikely scenario that Luke is still alive, I wouldn't consider it a bad fake-out death because, again, nothing definitively in the movie said to us as the audience, he's dead. So I don't know that we could qualify that as a fake-out. I don't know. There's a million different ways to look at this. I'm sure you guys are looking at it different ways than I am. But, hey, jump down in the comment section. Let me know how you guys are thinking about it. All right. Next up comes to us from Anthony R. And Anthony R. writes, Star Wars Rebels pleased me more than this current trilogy. When Lucasfilm does their next trilogy, they need to plan and have a real outline this time. I think one of the fair criticisms that even somebody like me, who is a defender of the new trilogy, I like the new trilogy, I'm a defender of the new trilogy and all that kind of wonderful stuff. I think for me, one of the things that is a fair criticism is that tone-wise, there is an inconsistency between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. That's a totally fair assessment. It totally is. Anybody who brings that criticism up to me, I'll go, yeah, you're right. There is. And I think at the heart of that is the fact that there was too much leeway given to how far you could break from what the first one was. You know, a lot of times in a new TV series, they bring in the big gun director to direct the first episode because they want that first episode to kind of set the tone. So now all the directors that come after it know you got to follow the tone that was set in that first episode. It becomes kind of the template for us, right? And you got to follow this moving forward. And I think one of the fair criticisms about, you know, the current trilogy is that they didn't make Rian Johnson stick. I mean, use your own creativity, but stick within these borders. Stick within this tone that was set up. And I think it is fair to say that they probably could have done a better job with that moving forward. All right, let's move on to the next question. Also from Anthony R., who writes, I know TV is different from movies, but I want Filoni to do a Star Wars movie. He understands Star Wars better than who we have now. He is part of George Lucas's old guard. I disagree with you. I disagree. I really, really do. To me, I didn't even like Clone Wars. Rebels, I count myself as a fan of Rebels. You guys know I am a fan of Rebels, but it was a very hit and miss show for me at times. There's a lot of stuff that was really ridiculous. A lot of times Filoni threw canon out the window. I am not at all convinced. Again, I'm not against it, but I am not at all convinced that Dave Filoni can handle doing an actual movie. I'm not. Until, and we've talked about this many times, until you give Dave Filoni a smaller budget film that has nothing to do with Star Wars, and you show me that he knows how to tell a story, a live action story, I'm never going to feel comfortable with the idea of Filoni doing a live action movie. I'm just not. Because I am not, again, he hasn't shown me a real solid consistency yet. But that's just me speaking as a fan. Okay, that's just me speaking as a fan. A lot of you guys may have a different opinion on that, and that's totally cool. But to me, he just hasn't shown me that he can handle it. He just has not shown me. Again, I'm not saying he couldn't. I'm just saying he's given me no reason to feel any confidence that he could, without showing me first in a smaller budget film that he can cut his teeth and actually direct a live action narrative story in a good, compelling way, that he knows how to handle characters. And I will disagree with you that he knows how to handle this property better than other people, because to me, some of my frustrations with Rebels has been over the fact that a lot of canon, whatever, throw that out the window. And yeah, so anyway, I'm just not there yet. I'm just not there with Filoni. I respect that you are. I respect that there are a lot of you guys who are. But I'm kind of in a place that I'm not buying it yet. All right, next up, and we just got time for a couple more here. Next up, SP Latest? Anyway, writes, best order to watch Star Wars films for newcomer. Skip any. Just watch the original trilogy, then watch Rogue One, The Force Awakens, and yeah, everything just minus the prequels. In the order that they actually came out in theaters, and that's probably how I would do it. And I think you'll be good to go. Although there are a million different, that question gets asked a lot. There are a million different orders, a million different variations about which order you could watch the Star Wars movies in and all that kind of stuff. And no wrong answer to that, really. Tyler Brusso writes, thanks for all you do. Still getting over Rebels. Yeah, and like I said, while Rebels is hit and miss for me, I miss it already. I do. I miss that. I'm not going to be able to watch another episode next week because I need my little dose of Star Wars. Let's see. Next up, Glitter Geek TV writes, have you read the novelizations? Makes me feel worse for Ben Solo / Kylo Ren. I can't believe I feel bad for that dumbass. Well, look, I have read passages. I'd say The Force Awakens, I probably read a grand total of about 30 pages. Just because I had somebody pass on to me the places that had significant differences or moderately large differences between the movie itself and the novelization. So I've read about 20 pages in grand total. So I haven't gone into it in depth. Again, one of the things that keeps me from reading it is understand that it's not really canon, then I don't really feel the need to read it. But you're not the first one to mention to me that the novelizations make Kylo even a little bit more sympathetic. And in that regard, he's kind of a bit like Killmonger in Black Panther. A villain who is clearly evil and clearly the bad guy, but you kind of feel bad for what set him on that path. You kind of feel bad for the dude that sent him going in that direction. And I really like the way you're describing that, Glitter Geek. You're saying, I feel bad for them. There's something really special when any movie or television show can make you truly detest the villain and yet at the same time legitimately feel bad for them at the same time. There's something really cool about that. And that's something that I feel like the new Star Wars films have done well with Kylo Ren. Again, I already said earlier, I think the Kylo Ren character is a great character. I like what they do with him. And it's not surprising to do that. So I like the way you articulated that. He's still a jerk, you hate his guts, blah, 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 and yet you feel bad for him. I think that's pretty special when a movie or a TV show or a novel can make you feel that at the same time for one and the same villain. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's see. Next up is Sam Demner, who writes, do you think that Lucasfilm will tie everything together in Episode 9 well? And how well do you think they have to stop... And let's try this again. And how well do you think they have to stop worrying most fans' problems with continuity? I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, Sam. Let me read it one more time. And how well do you think they have to stop worrying most fans' problems with continuity? I'm going to ignore that part of the question because I just don't know what you're asking, Sam. But how well do I think they'll tie everything together? I think moderately. I certainly hope they don't feel the need to tie it all up in a nice, tidy bow at the end, to leave it a little bit open-ended. Leave understanding that the story of Star Wars will continue, even though the story of Kylo Ren and the First Order might be over, but that the story of Star Wars and the galaxy continues. So I hope they don't try to tie it off in too neat of a bow at the end and make it just a nice, tidy little package at the end, but we'll just have to see which way they go with that. All right, next up, Dr. Strangelove writes, I want a hello, I am Poe, hello, I am Ray t-shirt with you saying it to yourself. It's getting catchy. That is definitely, people have been asking me for merchandise for a long time, and that is definitely one of the shirts I'll have to make. Hello, I am Poe, hello, I am Ray. That definitely has to be one of them. All right, and the final question I will take today comes to us from Big 4 Damn and Alfie Gamer, writes, it's an elaborate name, writes, hey John, do you think there will be a more iconic Sith Lord than Vader in the movies? He's my 9-year-old son's favorite Star Wars character. Stay awesome, brother. Look, even if you wanted to try to make one more iconic than Vader, you can't. Vader is it. He's not like just the most iconic villain in Star Wars. He's probably the most iconic villain in film ever. Like, period, end stop, no more continuation, no more characters needed. He's just it. And therefore, I think any attempt to, if it ever looks to the audience like you're trying to make a character who usurps and who surpasses Darth Vader, I think will come across as lame and silly. Don't even bother trying. Just give us great villains. Just give us great characters. Just give us great Sith, and that's all you got to do. Don't worry about making them as good or better than, we're going to make the audience like this guy more than Vader. Don't even try doing that. It's pointless, and all it'll do is it'll turn some fans on you. Just make great characters. And then if the fans start to decide that this great character you made is even better than Vader, well, leave that up to the fans to decide. Don't try to do it. Don't try to force the issue on your own. It's the way I kind of feel about it. But I just can't see it happening. I cannot see another character surpassing Vader that way. It's just, and who knows, maybe for some of you guys there are already. Maybe some of you guys, Sidious is already a better one than Vader. Maybe to some of you guys, Darth Maul is a better villain than Vader. Maybe, for all I know, some of you guys already think Kylo Ren is already a better villain than Vader. I don't know. Maybe there are. And if you do, that's cool. But for me, it's really difficult to imagine that ever becoming the case or ever becoming like a real thing. All right, guys, that will do it for me for today's installment, this week's installment of Star Wars Talk. Once again, don't forget, moving forward, guys, Star Wars Talk is now on Sunday afternoons. Thank you guys so much for being here and being a part of this. And listen, do me a favor, guys. If you guys are fans of my content, do me a favor and head on over to patreon.com/JohnCampia. Find out what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how being Patreon supporters keep my shows on the air. Literally, they're the reason the shows are even able to exist. And also what benefits there are to being a Patreon supporter. I know a lot of people keep texting me, John, why aren't there audio podcasts? There are audio versions of the podcasts for the Patreon supporters, amongst some other benefits as well. Go and check those out. Hey guys, make sure you're following me on social media. Just follow me on Twitter, simply @JohnCampia. Comment below. Make sure you click the thumbs up button. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campia, and until my next video, bye-bye.